Thank you. As cute as a kitten and as rough as a rhino. Taller than the world's tallest man. They're words taken from a poem written by my then 7-year-old son, entitled My Mum. And for me, that poem encapsulates the wonderful creativity, imagination, and open-mindedness that we have as children. I'm going to share Sandra's story with you. Sandra told me a story of when she was at school and she absolutely loved making things and creating things, and she was painting a picture, completely absorbed, and as she looked up she saw the teacher approaching her and she thought, oh, she's going to show everyone my picture. And she was so excited, and she talked about the pride of having her painting shared. And sure enough, the teacher picks up the painting, looks at it, looks at Sandra and says, "What is this?" And in that moment, Sandra's belief in her creativity was completely crushed. I met Sandra, she was in her 70s, and that happened when she was 7. And whilst it's quite harsh, it is so common a story that I hear when I'm working with people. I am not creative. We are not creative. And I think it comes, one, from this sort of crushing that we have of that fragile creativity as children, but two, the narrow bandwidth that we teach and educate our children of what creativity is. So I'd ask you, what could be possible in your life today if you could see the world through the eyes of your 7-year-old, creative, curious, open-minded self? We know that business needs creativity to grow. We see its evidence all the time around us. We know we need creativity to solve the problems of the planet. But I also know, working with individuals and young people, adults, CEOs, all sorts of people, that developing creativity enriches lives. And it's truly part of us. We are half intuitive creative, just like we're half logic and rationale. So what I want to do today is just expand your view of what it is to be creative. I want to debunk some of the myths around the creative genius, and look at ways of where you can work to actually foster and develop our creative thinking. And I'm going to introduce you to an artist, Jeremy Deller. Jeremy Deller has a similar story to Sandra. He was thrown out of art class because he couldn't draw. But Jeremy's experience was slightly different because he went into the art history class. And so his idea and his understanding of creativity was expanded, not shrunk. So whilst Jeremy can't draw, he doesn't paint, he doesn't make pots, he is a Turner Prize winning artist. And he's that because of his ability to make connections. So his creativity is very expansive. And I'm going to show a piece of Jeremy's work. The video I'm going to show you is about 1.5 minutes long. It shows you a project that he worked on in the early days, and he talks about his inspiration and how he made this project. So you can see there that he challenges that myth of the artist ego, the artist at the centre of the work, the tortured creative in the studio that's in a state of anxiety all the time, or this artist that just is magically creative. And he challenges that, really. And he talked about this project, it's called Acid Brass, and he says of it, it really freed up his thinking. He no longer had to hold on to the artist as the creator of objects. And it freed him into working with people, doing experimental things, and absolutely expanded his view on what it was to be an artist and be creative. So in front of you, or under your chairs, you've got a couple of balls of clay. And what I would like you to do is unwrap one of the balls of clay. Okay, what I'd like you to do is to create something for me. Okay, if you could just put that to one side, whatever you've made, and if you could unwrap the second ball of clay. Okay, and what I'd like you to do is create a bowl. A bowl. Okay, so the thing is with that, is most people find it's so much easier to be creative if you've got a framework and a structure to work with. And when I said to you, create something for me, you've got to engage your thinking brain. So it slows you down. When if I say create a bowl, you're not even going to the conscious level, you're probably just going in subconscious. You don't even have to think about it. It allows you the freedom to create. And there's a paradoxical relationship between restraint and freedom. So we need the framework in order to be creative. So that's another myth, that people are just free-flowing creative and it just all happens. Actually, most artists work within a process. And it's sort of the unconscious competence that they don't even know they have a process. So when you're talking to artists, and when we see artists being interviewed, they just go, oh yeah, it just came to me. You know, actually, they're working in a process. And I think it's captured in this verse that I've taken from the Taoist thinking. It's an ancient Eastern religion. And this is a verse, or two verses from The Way. The wall around the clay bowl is moulded, but the use of the bowl will depend on the part that is void. Cut out the windows and doors of the house that you build, but the use of the house will depend on the space between the walls. That is void. So advantages have had from whatever is there, but usefulness comes from whatever is not. And for me, the framework around the creative process are the walls, the structure that allows us the space and the freedom to be free in our creative thinking. So when Jeremy talked about it appearing, he'd gone through a process. He'd worked through that process in order to get where he got with that acid brass. And for me, the process is really nailing down the why and the what. And so we can be expansive in the how, in the creative element. And for me as an artist, the why is the emotional motivation. Why am I emotionally motivated by this? It's the political motivation. Why do I want to make a difference? In business, the why might be still the emotional. It's absolutely the emotional, because you cannot move people without emotionally engaging them. And everyone knows the Simon Sinek talk that talks about the why, and that's critical. But also the why as in, what's the commercials? You need the commercials to motivate people in and really nail that why phase. And the what is the goals. So as an artist, I would be into, what conversations do I want to generate? What does the audience look like? Those are the whats for me as an artist. And you see, Jeremy, the what would have been, he wanted it to be mass. He wanted it to be enjoyed by as many people as possible. He wanted it to be live. You know, that's the what for that Acid Brass. And for business, the what is the commercials. It's what's my client? What market do I want to be in? What's the size of it? So that is really nailing down the goal. And there's your structure. Be really clear in the why and be really clear in the what, so you can be expansive in the how. Because the how, we rely on our intuition. And the famous mathematician, French mathematician, Henri Poincaré, he said that science proves, intuition discovers. And another writer, Ian McGilchrist, who's written The Divided Brain, and there's a TED talk about it, he talks about the divided brain, the right and the left hemisphere. And he talks of the left hemisphere, it's the rational, logical side of us. It has a voice. It's the Berlusconi of the brain. It's great at self-promotion. Whereas the intuitive, creative side of us is silent, it's voiceless, it cannot articulate. It's the vulnerable part of us. Think of this, saying to your boss, intuitively, I feel it's the right investment to make, you know. So it is the vulnerable part of us. So we need the structure. We need the structure of the why and the what in order to have the freedom. We need the space to be secure. We need the environment to be safe. And we need to have trust. Trust in the process and trust in the people. Now, as an artist, we trust in ourselves when we're making things because we've done it time and time again. We trust in the people we work with because we get the why right. We're convinced. Jeremy would have convinced people through his why, and then there's the trust in the relationship because you're all moving in the same direction. But it is this vulnerable part of us. So in business, you have to be mindful of that people are vulnerable in this stage. You don't want them switching to that left brain, to the logic. You need the feed into the why from the intuitive, vulnerable side. And it's okay to say to people and to somebody making a piece of clay pottery or something, you've got to come out with some ideas. We want you to have this space to generate some ideas. Just come out with ideas. It's not okay to say, you've got to come out with the answer, you've got to come out with the results. Because if I say to you, I want some ideas, your mind goes to drift in, peaceful place. If I say, I want a result, your mind switches to left side, and I need an answer, I need evidence, I need proof. So as soon as you say to people, you pin them down for results, you're going to kill the intuitive part. So it's essential to nurture that vulnerable space and make it a safe space. The other part, so that's sort of debunking that myth of it's all free-flowing. The other myth is around it happens, the magic happens. Well, it does, but it's not immediate. And procrastination, we are taught, is a bad thing. Well, actually, with creativity, it can be a very good thing. So if we go back to Henri Poincaré, he talks about a mathematical problem that was really complex. And he couldn't solve it. And this man's a genius. Couldn't solve it, couldn't find the answer. So he had to park it and leave it. And then he's on a walk a week later, walking up some stairs. And suddenly, the solution comes to him. Perfect solution, fully formed. And what he says is that procrastination is good because it allows the subconscious to work. So if you're in a situation you're asked to be creative, you don't have to force it. You just have to feel it. You just have to nurture it and let it sink in. And maybe you have to give time between thinking it and going through the process in the first place and coming back to it. Because procrastination isn't always wrong, but it does always take time. And if you think about Jeremy and his beging moment, that wonderful flowchart that came into his head, you know, you just know, now I talk about procrastination, he's gone through that whole thing, he's sat with it, he's seen those two words, and his subconscious has worked the magic and come with the solution. And truly that's what happens. As an artist, I will have an idea. I never work on an idea when I first have it. I just let it sit. And the universe pays out. That's what it feels like. But it's actually my subconscious. You know, my longest project took me 4 years. Because I started and I couldn't see what it was going to look like until I sat down with a 9-year-old 4 years after I started, and the whole thing came into my head. And that happens all the time. So, when you're feeling not creative and you're feeling stressed, remember that you are a logical, rational self, but you are intuitive, creative self too. We are all creative. Think of the words as cute as a kitten, as rough as a rhino. Or find your own visualization that takes you back to that open-minded, curious 7-year-old self. She's nice, my mum. She's as holy as an angel, and she's a brilliant cook. She's as swift as a swallow and as pretty as a butterfly. And I love my mum. And you know what? She'll always love me.